Hello, my name is Anjin Anhut, and I would like to give you a super quick and introductory guide into the world of game design. Games come in all shapes and sizes and forms. Some come on boards, on courts, on fields, on decks, some on paper, some don't need anything besides the players themselves, and some come in the form of video games. Now, for us to talk about how to make one, it would be super helpful to get an understanding of what the ingredients of a game are and how they work together, right? Interestingly, much of what constitutes a game and what does not is still up for debate among people who study games. I like to work from a rather useful and popular model for understanding what games are made of and what to consider when making games. MDA. Mechanics, Dynamics, Aesthetics. This model gets taught in many game design classes and is based on a pretty interesting white paper which I recommend you find online and read. Let's go through each of the three components step by step. Let's have a look at basketball for a second and let's compile a minimal set of rules to play it. It's a competitive team sport. We play in order to find out who is the better team. We need to specify what the players of each team are supposed to do to win. How about throwing a ball through a hoop for starters? Now, we also need to specify what the teams are not allowed to do. For example, standing closer to the hoop, or using ladders, or throwing pies at the opposing team. This basic set of rules ensures that both teams are competing at doing the same thing without exploiting unfair advantages and without unwanted things to happen like people getting hurt. Also, very important, we need a way to quantify the results so we can check how well each team is doing, which team wins, which team loses, and by what margins. This is where scores and time limits come in. Hits per minute is something we can count and compare to the other team and previous results. In a real game of basketball, these rules need to be agreed upon by all players, and there needs to be a referee to check if every player plays by the agreed upon rules. So far, so good. Let's transfer that to video games. Games which are played in virtual spaces and computer-calculated scenarios. In a video game, a virtual space, these rules are mechanically enforced. We do not need a referee to keep an eye on the players because the players mechanically can only do what the game designers allow them to do. If the designers do not allow the virtual player character to get close to the hoop or throw pies, then that's it. There's nothing the player can do. Though, in the case of game mechanics, the understanding of what rules mean needs to be wider than just behavior of players. For example, the ball in the video game is not actually there. No ground, no hoop, gravity, no player characters. The way a ball behaves when it hits the ground in a virtual space, the way it bounces, the height, the speed of its movement, even the ability of the ball to actually hit the ground at all, and how a human sitting on a sofa pressing button translates into a virtual character throwing a ball, all of it needs to be defined by the game designer first and then turned into game mechanics by the programmers. Nothing happens on its own. While it's a great responsibility to get simple things like ball handling right and tight mechanically to make it feel believable and responsive, the fact that you are in control of all behaviors in your game world, from characters to objects to spaces to physics, means you have great power as well to shape every behavior as you see fit to make exciting things happen, which leads us to dynamics. Okay, so looking at our minimal set of rules and mechanics for our little basketball game, two things can happen. A player throws the ball and hits the hoop, a player throws and misses. That's it. Afterwards, we quantify the hits and misses and see who won. That's not very exciting, is it? Because it's not very dynamic. The range of possible occurrences is not very wide, so let's change that by tweaking the rules and adding more mechanics. Let's say we just have one ball, so both teams need to get in possession of the ball first before throwing, and let's make it 2 hoops on each opposing side of a court, so both teams have 1 hoop to attack and 1 to defend, and need to move the ball somehow to the opposite side of the court without losing possession of it. Now, much more skills are involved in making that eventual scoring throw, and much more things can go wrong or right. There are much more things now determining the outcome of the match. Players no longer just need to aim and throw well. They need to be quick on their feet, think tactically, communicate and coordinate, jump high to block throws, steal balls, keep balls, and much more. Adding more mechanics and rules to a game so it becomes more dynamic makes playing it more exciting and varied, allows for play style and expression, demands strategic planning, adds the element of risk and reward. But game designers need to be careful here. They need to guide the dynamics so nothing unwanted happens. Games should not be over too quick. Everything still needs to feel fair and stay fair. Not too easy, not too hard. You don't want the player to exploit the system you set up. Putting numbers on mechanics, numbers to tweak and balance, works pretty well on that front. How fast can players run? How far can they throw? How often do they hit or miss the target? Yes, you as the game designer can put controlled numbers on luck. Okay, now that we talked about mechanics and dynamics, there's just one thing left before we wrap up. The aspect of aesthetics in game design deals with how things look and sound and are otherwise presented. The graphics you pick and the sounds you add, as well as the way everything moves, drastically changes the game experience, even if you stick to a certain set of mechanics. It can turn a basketball game into an attack on a castle, or into a sea battle, or into action painting, or into feeding time for a T-Rex, into whatever you can think of. Okay, let's quickly wrap this video up. Define all the things you want to happen when the player plays the game, including the obvious ones like winning or losing, but also the more nuanced ones like what the player should learn to do and how he should feel playing it. Or all the small things that can make each play session unique and memorable. Then, come up with mechanics which allow the player to make those things happen. Mechanics which guide the player towards making the really important things happen. And mechanics which force the player to make the necessary things happen. Come up with mechanics that keep track of quantifiable outcomes, so the player always knows how well he's doing and if he improved and why he won or lost and by which margin. Define all the things you really don't want to happen in a play session and come up with mechanics which force the player to avoid those things. Let your game be played and tested by others. You're not making games just for yourself, are you? Put numbers on as many mechanics as possible so that mechanics are easy to tweak. Find a great audio-visual representation, which puts everything in an interesting narrative context, which makes everything feel just like it should, and which adds a nice personal touch to your own game. Learn and read and talk to other developers. Make games in order to learn how to make games. And don't let anything I just told you hold you back on your great next game idea. Play you soon. Bye.